my thesis for grad school was going to be a book that I wrote, designed, and at some points illustrated. And the book was going to be about the history of the African American superhero and tying it in with African mythology. And I was taking a class at the time called Afro-Caribbean Art and Ritual, so I could get my mind right about it. And I studied more about the Vodou religion. And in particular, I studied Santeria and Candomblé. And what fascinated me about Santeria and Candomblé is that the root of that was the Yoruba religion from Nigeria. And this religion survived the slave trade. And it hid itself. This culture, this religion hid itself in plain sight. For instance, how many of you guys are familiar with martial art capoeira? Slaves are like, all right, let's get back to doing this. That's the same thing that they did with religion. The thing about the Yoruba culture is that they had their gods and goddesses called the Orishas. And they were able to hide the Orishas in the saints of Christianity. Because again, one of the rules that the slave masters put on the slaves was that you can't study your own religion. Also, I wanted to steep it into my culture so much so that I would not have to talk about culture and race in the book. Because the things that I knew, things that I realized, especially at that time I was creating it, is that A, black characters don't sell. B, black characters by black creators don't sell. And C, black characters created by black creators who own a comic book company don't sell. So I had those three strikes against me. So in order to counteract those strikes, I said to myself, well, first of all, I want to write a book that's universal so that people forget about the fact that they're reading about 7 characters of color, but that they're just reading a cool comic. Secondly, I wanted to make sure that the book looked as good as the best DC or Marvel book up on the stage, The Horsemen. The new mythology. The story of the Horsemen is this. The gods of ancient Africa have returned to possess 7 people to save humanity from itself. So it's not about just one culture. It's not about just one people. The Horsemen have come to save the world. The villains, if you will, in the Horsemen mythology are what I'd like to call the deities. And the deities represent another aspect of the world. The deities represent, again, all of these different world mythologies. Like I deal with Asian mythology, South American mythology, Indian mythology. I even deal with Judeo-Christian studies. All of this stuff, all of this is part of the world. All of this is part of our collective consciousness as I was working on this book. I love the fact that I'm a part of this sort of camaraderie, this sort of crew of artists in the 21st century. People who are like-minded. People coming from all walks of life, all different cultures, who are influenced by all different cultures in their art style and in their stories. Artists like Sanford Green, artists like Kari Randolph, Mark Kudelka, who is a big fan of like the big Japanese monster heroes like Ultraman, Johnny Psycho Giant Robot, and stuff like that. Guys like Steve Ellis with his book High Moon, which is off of Zuni Comics, which combined werewolves and westerns really nice. Karan Grant, who's one of the best artists I've ever known. And also a cat by the name of Da Zhang. Now Da Zhang, it was really interesting meeting him. I met him last year at the San Diego Comic Con. And we connected right away. We were kindred spirits right away. And we had a great conversation of how we felt about comics and culture and mythology and power that comics have. The interesting thing about this discussion is that I don't speak Cantonese. He doesn't speak English. But automatically, we understood each other. And we were on the same point. And the thing is that, culture is still existing, and culture is becoming more into play with comics nowadays. And that's another thing that I'm really digging. I'm really digging the fact that, we have comics from Indian creators using Indian mythology from Virgin Comics. India has a big comic. The fact that we have, more Latino creators bringing their culture, their flavor into books. Again, China, Japan, the world. The wonderful thing about comic books is that comic books are a global language. And they're also a very ancient language. Comic books have been with us since before the written word. Hieroglyphics are comic books. Heck, back in the day, when I like to call them Ukanook, caveman, it's like after a hard day of traveling and fighting caribou and stuff like that. At the end of the day, they're picking his bones and he picks up a piece of ochre and he picks up a piece of charcoal and he draws the story. That's all I'm doing, is I'm continuing that tradition that Ukanook started and just bringing it into the 21st century. And I'm glad to say that I'm not the only one. I'm glad to say that I am in this industry that is all about creating new worlds.